Hello everyone. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Get comfortable and relax. Working nights, I am a nurse. 2 times I have been strolled on my way home under stalking. I would want to show you them. I experienced this living in Tokyo and Chicago. Around 12:30 a.m., I was on the last train of the evening headed home. At the top of the steps is a convenience store when you get off the train and leave the subway. In a residential neighborhood, my residence at the time was roughly 7 minutes distance from this business. When you get off the final train home at that late night, the convenience store's lights essentially provide the only source of illumination in the vicinity. Usually too are the roads empty. As I was ascending the subway stairs, I came upon a man fixed on me at the top. He kept enlarging his eyes and staring, then flitting about restlessly. I realized the man was weird at that instant. I went across the road disregarding the traffic signals. Given the somewhat eerie circumstances, I instantly glanced over my shoulder and decided to head home fast. I sensed presence behind me as I strolled. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw the strange Metro man trailing after me. He was getting us closer. I started running without thinking or delay. I recall sprinting like mad, terrified and panicked. It was very dark, no one was on the streets to assist me, no cars were bypassing. I hid there after veering into someone's private garden and pushed the gate aside. I crept around the rear of the house overlooking a road. I spotted my chance when a taxi drove past. The cab driver has to have seen how hopeless I appeared. That night he slowed down and saved me. I relocated to another apartment just in front of a different train station following this event. This seemed to be far safer. It was well lit, packed with people even at night, with a 24-hour taxi stand and buses. That was encouraging. About 2 years had I been living in my new house when something else happened to me. Naturally, that happened on my way home from my night shift. I used to cut a shortcut across a dark alley when I left the hospital to head home in those days. I knew I had seen the same man once more there. I dashed to the train station, got on, and found him once more as I settled down. The man was fixated on me, must have followed me aboard the train. About this, I felt somewhat awful. He kept staring at me and wriggling in his seat. The train drew into my stop. I approached the doors as closely as I could, then dashed as soon as they opened. I hurried to a known-to-be-busy exit. I removed my jacket and tried to fit among the throngs. I peeked over my shoulder when I discovered a safe spot to hide. He was there, frantically looking around. I understood the degree of risk I was under. Fortunately, the west end of the station featured a police box. I started to worry in the coming days that the man would know where I lived or be ready to ambush me the next time I got off at the station. I gave the cops all I could about the man. One of the cops labeled him as perverted, apparently knowing who I was referring to. Shakes ran down my spine when he uttered it. Like me in those days, many young nurses in Japan work late. 10 years on, and I still get chills thinking about that. Though Japan is a calm country, be careful walking home late at night. Back in 2010, this took place. I was working in a suburban hotel, a nice location, rather peaceful. I worked as a part-time front desk clerk and part-time night auditor when starting. Before moving to my Monday through Friday schedule, I had 1 week left at the front desk after being promoted to a day position. It was exactly like every other night. About 3 a.m., I got a call. The man tried to start a conversation with me and sounded to be in his mid-20s. Naturally, he starts asking personal questions, things like, "Do you have a boyfriend?" and "Would you want to go out for a drink?" when I had to provide my name upon answering the phone. Though it looked innocuous, I told him I had work to do and was hanging up. He withheld a name from me. Rather, he asked, Why do not you call me John?" I hung up and completed my rotation. About 3:30 a.m. the following night, I got another call. John was once more here. He asked me out for a drink at first, which I turned down and hung up. 5 more times that evening, he phoned back, each time making more obscene remarks and simply attempting to keep me going. "I see you like singing karaokes," he said upon ending his last call. "I enjoy doing that. Maybe we could go out sometime." It dawned on me at that point. He presumably came upon me on Twitter. A few nights previously, I had gone out with pals and posted about it. He would not tell me how he obtained my entire name when I asked him. Once again I hung, and he was done for the evening. I straight erased my Foursquare and Twitter pages. I told my supervisor what had been happening when she showed there at 7 a.m. We told the general manager. My security guard included it into his report. Thank goodness I only worked 2 overnights a week. But he did likewise when I returned the next week. Once more, starting at roughly 3 in the morning, the phone conversations lasted roughly 1 hour. Still, this time it was different. John took offense at me wiping up my accounts. He said he was unable to monitor me and ensure I was not cheating on him. I advised him to F*** off and that my security guard would be picking all of my calls going ahead. I was not answering the phone anymore. On the line, there was quiet for roughly 10 seconds. "You're gonna be with me whether you like it or not. I'm coming for you," he yelled. And he hung up. I phoned the police and frightened the hell out. I was not alone as fortunately my security guard was present. Given that it only took the police a few minutes to arrive, tonight must have been slow. When I phoned my night supervisor, who had departed at 11 p.m., he helped me to cool down. One of the cops stayed with me till my shift finished out of kindness. I then informed my supervisor that I would not and could not complete my last week of nighttime work. Fortunately, they relocated me to afternoon and understood. The staff received an email directing everyone that any calls from me were to go to the general manager. The calls then stopped, except from a few tries to get to the security guard. He warned him I would leave because of him. My security guard had then stopped exactly like that. I still get scared over this today. We believe he might have been a past hotel guest. I never did get his name, though. I started a new work, and there was this man there who used to watch me everywhere. Though we shared a department, we did not collaborate closely. Though it was rare, we occasionally collaborated. Few months after I started, all the strange things began. I had also relocated into a new apartment close to my workplace by foot. I was walking home one October night when a tall man sporting a sweatshirt abruptly emerged from the bushes as I passed by. This seemed strange. I turned back and noticed him observing me standing by some trees before I arrived at my flat. He hurried behind the trees to conceal when he knew I had seen him. When I told my boyfriend, he reasoned it was most likely just a drug dealer. I so began following another route. About a month later, I ran across the same man once more, this time kneeling beside a parking lot trailer. He stood up and began to walk away from me, but he kept looking back. 1 week later he turned up once more. He emerged from behind the trailer and began to walk toward me midway on my trip home. I ran inside, beeline for my flat door. He knew the place I resided in this time. In the past, I would go around the front to make sure he couldn't tell which one belonged to me. He looked to be trying to work things out. He could have assaulted me earlier but chose not. That added even more unsettling factor. It was not limited there either. I was let go and began working at another company. Just 3 weeks later, I was boarding the bus when I spotted a man who looked shockingly like the one from the parking lot. He watched me as I started. I rushed to the rear of the bus. He pulled the string at my stop and left also. I hesitated and watched, expecting he would simply keep on walking, But he did not. He slowed down, perhaps expecting me to pass him. I followed him till we came to some lights. He remained still. I concealed and hurried quicker, just in case he was trying to find out where I worked currently. I also ran across my former coworker on the train returning from an interview during that period. When he saw me, he started sprinting since he knew I was headed in the same way. Strangely, though, he ran slowly, like if he had a limp or something. When I was at the mall with my mother, I also spotted him hanging about. That wasn't as unusual, it's a well-known location, but it fueled the worry. Then COVID caused me to be laid off once more, and I spent a month not going out very much. Later, I discovered a new job close by on foot. One weekend, I was leaving work when I spotted a man following me once more, and he looked exactly like the man from before. I hurried and arrived at several traffic lights. Gone was he. I saw none for roughly 1 month. One warm night near midnight, I was walking home when I came upon a white automobile apparently concealed from any surveillance cameras behind a store. Someone was obviously inside, its headlights were on. I kept looking over my shoulder, uncomfortable. I persuaded myself everything was okay and carried on walking. But then I experienced that strong, basic gut feeling. I turned to face the rear. It was a former colleague of mine. He was in front of me. I went as quickly as I could. I turned around only once, that is, once I had separated us somewhat. He disappeared. Fortunately, around the end of the route, some men were waiting for the bus. Knowing I wasn't alone, I wasn't really concerned at that time. 1 more month passed. Early May then, at about 9 p.m., I was strolling to a grocery store. A man in a hoodie passed me as I came near, headed toward the bus station. He probably heard me telling my boyfriend I was strolling home with groceries. When I came out of shopping, I noticed an elderly man looking like a teenager, dressed exactly like the man from before. Standing outside the store, he watched me and tried to approach. I informed my partner right away to order me an Uber. I disappeared next to some fertilizer sacks. He set out searching for me. I watched him and let him know I knew what he was doing. He turned back, lifeless eyes. Fortunately, my Uber showed up just on schedule. Though I'm not sure if this man was related to my former coworker or just some random lunatic, I know that following my gut feeling most likely saved me. I made my lover see me anytime I worked late going forward. A few days later, as we were strolling together, we came upon a car with headlights on parked in front of a store. The automobile gently began to move as we passed. It crawled along and drove to another plaza. It drove us both crazy. When I told my lover, even he started to get afraid. I identified the car. It looked to be the one his mother had picked him up from work once. The next evening, we also noticed a man simply hanging behind a dark van with a wide-open passenger door. He started trailing after us when we passed him. We cranked up the speed and disappeared. 10 minutes later, I spotted a man in a hoodie crouching behind a building with his back pressed against the wall. Though they scared my boyfriend as well, I'm not sure whether those two events had anything to do. And mind you, for a month I used to stroll home by myself without trouble. I suppose whoever had been observing me started moving as it grew warm. I adjusted my hours at last. Though I persisted, my managers treated me poorly on it. They started allowing me expensive Ubers or transportation home. After 10 p.m., I never walked, not even with my boyfriend. May saw me see the car of my former coworker several times as managers took me home. Still, it stopped eventually. He probably understood that I would not be leaving tonight. I am now assigned morning shifts. I used to close, but not anymore. Still, I'm not sure if I'm done stalker-wise. About 9 p.m. last month, I was strolling alone toward the grocery shop once more. I watched my former colleague drive by. I brushed it aside. He lives in the vicinity. I have seen him previously. 30 minutes later, though, I spotted him once more while strolling back with my partner. Same man. Same parking lot hidden. He started walking away when he noticed both of us, but he kept looking back to check if we entered the apartment. Regretfully, university studies have me back to working till 10 p.m. Now, though, my partner meets me every time. I worry that everything will once more start to run backwards. I am truly afraid. Nearly a year has gone by now. I thus work the graveyard shift and ride the same bus home every morning after work. A bit more than a year ago, a man began riding that same bus, a man I most likely wouldn't have noticed if he hadn't been gazing at me so clearly. I first paid very little attention. He seemed to be an older man, and I reasoned perhaps he simply thought I looked strange or dressed differently, something older people occasionally do. Still, he persisted in gazing. Not only glancing, full-on, shameless eye contact. Usually, he sat in front of the bus and I sat in the rear. Sometimes, though, he would abruptly turn around for minutes at a time and just fix his eyes on me. It made me uneasy, particularly when he started noting which stop I left off at. A few days later, I discovered that he would turn around and fix his attention on me, trailing me, just before my stop. He picked up my daily schedule. I was really exhausted around 6 months ago after work. I started nodding off at the rear of the bus since the travel lasts around 40 minutes. I felt suddenly this strong, someone was observing me. When I opened my eyes, he was seated squarely in front of me, silently staring back. That startled me to be woke. I watched till he turned away, then closed my eyes once more. A few minutes later I rose up to leave at my station. He reached out his hand in front of me to obstruct my path as I did. Not sure, I removed my headphones and inquired what he wanted. He carried a strong accent. I could hardly understand him from his harsh pronunciation. One word came to me, hand. I'm sorry, what? Startled, I inquired. He begged me to hold his hand. Totally out of it, I glanced at him and screamed, no. I passed him just straight ahead. Things got more intense following that. He started seated more and closer to me instead of front. I could feel his gaze on me even not looking. Though I overthink things and suffer anxiety, I was starting to realize this was not in my head. He arrived on the bus last week as usual and settled across the aisle from me. I could see him slanted in from the corner of my eye. I stared at him, removing my headphones. Saying something incomprehensible, he concluded with, I said good morning. Morning, I said, nodding gently in hope he would leave it at that. But he failed. He fixed his gaze on me the whole trip. I attempted to brush it aside. I had started to dull myself to his actions. But I soon began to get uncomfortable once more. Like usually, this morning I got on the bus and started reading through my phone. After some while, I saw two legs show up next me. I searched and there he was. He fixed his gaze on the seat across from me, where I had arranged my rucksack. He grinned then and said, good morning. He sat squarely in front of me and leaned in before I could reply. He appeared from a distance to be in his 60s. Closely, though, I would estimate mid-50s. Though not in a reassuring manner, he resembled a grandfather. Although he was grinning, it seemed odd. Haunted. He inquired, how are you? Not interacting further, I said, I'm good. I expected he would pick up the cue. He murmured something and then turned oddly hostile toward me. I said nothing and turned back toward my phone. Are you taken? He then asked. In these circumstances, whether or not it is true, I always answer yes. I nodded thus. Too bad, he said, grinning. I had to ask, "You seem to be. Was it indeed?" He immediately began to lament the fact he lacked someone to squeeze. How long had I been in a relationship? He inquired. "Do you work in a grocery shop or a kindergarten?" he then asked. "None," I answered. He inquired about my employment location and the start time of my shift. I was annoyed at that moment, not only nervous. 6 in the morning, and a man twice my age was scorching me about my personal life after glaring at me for a year. Then he got up suddenly and sat exactly behind me. Though nope, I felt he had at last sensed the cue. A few minutes later he leaned down and murmured, "So what year were you born?" I answered, frigidly, "I was born in 1997. He nodded and slanted back. "You were that young, then?" He sat behind me for perhaps 10 minutes before getting up and strolling back to the bus front. Still, he kept turning around to study me. This is not some dramatic finale horror story, but it's quite uncomfortable. And, if I'm honest, I should switch buses. I work as a firefighter, and the area where I live is home to a somewhat strange religious group, basically a cult. Everybody familiar with them knows about on the surface, especially when you speak with them, they seem courteous, but some of the older members are quite odd. They object when we answer phones in their buildings. Actually, they will do all they can to keep us out. Their own private airport boasts helicopters and aircraft. Though formally, they say it's for shipping translated Bibles to South America, we joke about it being used for drugs or people trafficking. We once answered a fire alarm in the garage. Nobody was expected to be inside at the middle of the night. But my girlfriend and I both thought we noticed someone moving under cover of darkness. The man we met at the hangar insisted on accompanying us and grew clearly agitated when we told he couldn't. That was hardly the only unusual occurrence. They give us looks as we pass their fire engine compound, not inquisitive eyes but rather these strong death stares. First, I considered perhaps they were responding to the spectacle or the sirens. No, though, their faces suggested they intended to murder us. Occasionally we will be returning late from a call late at night and find members riding or wandering beside the road. They will stop what they are doing and watch us when they see us, just watch, until we pull into the station and enter. Nobody in the town knows exactly what goes on in the one large building they all occupy. One develops increasing mistrust of them. Increasing numbers of residents in the town are beginning to observe their unusual conduct. The ideas merely keep developing. Though we joke about them a lot, really something seems off. Something we cannot fully grasp with our fingers. If one day we discovered they were engaged in something even darker than biblical cargo, one would not be surprised. I work in the public sector, more precisely in a library where the books are free as long as you have a card. We naturally attract a fair number of odd customers. I understand some are obviously disturbed or have mental health problems. It does not, however, make certain meetings any less eerie. Every now and then I used to see this one man. He would merely gaze, not say much. Not only at me but also at almost anyone. Just staring still, eyes locked. Still, one night he focused just on me during my shift. I just observed a few times while working. We closed and I thought I had avoided him by walking to the grocery shop. He was there, though, when I got to the bus stop. That felt strange. Before the bus we both got on, he had gone early enough to catch at least 2 separate buses, yet here he was still waiting. Trying not to think too much of it, I sat down to relax for a little but he walked about the stop the whole time staring at me. Not staring back. I am a rather large man now. I get uncomfortable, quite a bit of work involved. Still, this guy managed it in roughly 2 minutes. He grabbed my seat right away when I stood up, intending to get a better view should something happen. That alone was strange enough, but he chose the identical seat I had been in instead of the unoccupied one next to it. and he followed me around the stop, obviously trying to separate us with his eyes. I eventually turned around to head back to my job. There felt safer, even with all the typical weirdos milling about. I decided I would rather gamble with the ones I knew than with this man who exuded negative emotions. Fairly speaking, I do not believe I was in immediate danger. If that had come to pass, physically I could have taken him. Still, that is not really the purpose. It's more about not knowing what someone like that could try than about physical safety. I felt a little rush of relief as the bus at last came around. Before the headlights came, the LED sign crested the hill, and for a minute the night seemed to seem just a little less tense. But then he started. This man had looked at me before, but he had never ridden a bus. He had plenty of money tonight. I knew then, he was trailing after me. He trailed behind me as I headed toward the rear of the bus. I thus turned unexpectedly and sat close to the front. And now, guess what? Weaseled his way into the front, seated just across from me. I attempted a little sleep, but the same chill passed through me. You know the one, that when you know you are under observation. I squinted open. Still staring was he there. Still lacking blinking. Then arrived the scene that actually terrified me. My usual bus stop, the one nearest to my house, has been closed for roughly 1 week or so for some rerouting or building-related reasons. I had to leave from the station before mine. The location was somewhat sketchy. Trees covered the streetlight, rendering this little stretch of pavement nearly black. This man seemed to lack awareness of that. He got off the bus as the stop before mine arrived came up. He turned behind him, though, and discovered I was still seated. Then I watched, appalled, as he turned and settled back. He followed me once more. I grabbed my chance right then. I got off the bus quickly. I turned back when the doors closed. Furious, he was fixed on me across the glass. He had not expected me to leave that platform. His shot missed. I could see clearly the next stop as the road I was on ran straight for blocks. I looked intently, but he stayed on the bus. Not since have I seen him. And I never do as well. A few months ago, I moved into a big apartment complex designed for studios. I am a single lady with a 2-year-old daughter. My sister and her friends visited around 3 weeks ago to hang out, drink some beers, and engage in Card Against Humanity playthrough. Except for a door-sized aperture, my studio boasts an enclosed terrace. I had everyone relax on the terrace because my baby was sleeping. We were having a terrific time, joking, chatting, listening to subdued music. At this point, the security guard entered my terrace. "Hi there," I asked. "Are we speaking too loudly?" No, he answered. "You people are good. I'm simply on my rounds here." He stayed for a minute before meandering off into the evening. We carried on as usual and gave it little thought. Most of the party had left about 25 minutes later. I stayed together with my sister and her buddy Cody. The guard came back and struck up another discussion. He told us he was a retired police officer who had left his agency following a heart attack on duty. Said he picked up night security employment following a triple bypass. The medical background made me feel guilty for him, hence I sat and listened to him talk. He stayed for at least 30 minutes before my sister became uneasy. She said clearly we were going to bed. "Good night," he bid us, then turned away. My sister complained she didn't like his attitude toward her once he left. She believed he was starting to show me favor. She was reading too much into it. I told her that he was most likely just lonely and had a long shift ahead of him. A week and a half later, my sister was visiting once more and we were seated indoors. My studio boasts a wooden main door and a black screen door. I left the wood door open to allow some air that night. The screen door was locked. We were talking when I started to feel as though someone was observing me. I stared up. Standing calmly at my patio's door, the security guy was staring. I greeted him and he jokingly moved forward, maybe expecting me to invite him in or something. Still, I turned back toward my sister. When I turned around, he had disappeared. Then, just a few nights ago, I had the most horrible incident of yet. Tuesday arrived. Just after bathing, I threw on my crimson silk Japanese-style robe. About 20-25 minutes of dishwashing had passed before I poured a glass of wine and turned to face the couch. I almost let out a yell at that. Staring squarely at me across the foot-long opening in the open wooden door, the security guy was practically mashed up against my screen door. Startled and shaking was my response. I first checked my robe to be sure I wasn't visible. I hurried to the door then. Trying to keep my voice cool, I answered, "You scared me." He exhibited no feeling at all. "Not sorry. I was just doing my rounds," he said straightforwardly. I could feel my scalp crawling. "All right, then. Right now I'm heading to bed." He was still standing there, exactly next to the door, totally inside my patio. Then he turned to check my beach cruiser positioned against the wall. "You do have a bike, oh. You ought to store it indoors. One could assume someone would pick it." I said fast, slamming and locking the door, "Yeah, I'll get to it." With my drink, I sat down hoping to relax. Though startled, I was not sure, was he a creep? Or simply an elderly lonely man misreading the circumstances? Following discussions about it with a friend and sister, I decided to let the property manager know. How fast it grew startled me. They listened over the phone my verbal report. They told me he had been sacked today. Should I spot the property manager on the grounds once more, she advised me to immediately notify the police. I used to work at this drive-up coffee shop, so let me give you some background information at this point. We not only sold coffee, but also munchies such as bagels and muffins. Considering that I reside in a rather small town and that I had never before encountered anything similar to this, you could say that I was relatively shaken up. On that particular Sunday evening, I was shutting the business by myself for the very first time in my whole life. Unfortunately, there were not many customers coming in at that time, and it was almost late. I was performing the typical closing operations, which included sweeping, mopping, and other similar tasks. We kept the broom and the mop in a separate utility room that was only accessible from the outside with a key. This is an important element to keep in mind. Due to the fact that I was going in and out of that room, I did not lock the door that leads to the staff entrance. Before long, the sky turned dark. An old Ford pulled up just as I was going to leave, which was almost an hour away. It was an older man, maybe in his 40s, who was driving. But I wasn't very shaken by it. It was common for oil rig workers to stop by for a pick-me-up before beginning their lengthy night shifts at the rigs, which were located in the vicinity of this location. The window was opened, and I inquired about his order of what he would want to have. That's when things started to become strange. He did not place any orders, not even for a snack or a cup of coffee. Rather than that, he inquired, "Are you working by yourself?" That caused my blood to become ice cold. In every respect, I was working by myself. At that point, both of my bosses had already left the pawn store that was located next door, which they also owned. On the other hand, I was fortunate enough to be able to lie. I responded by saying, "Oh no, my coworker will be back in a second, and my manager's coming by in about 5 minutes to take inventory." He smiled at me with a terrifying expression as he stared past me through the breach in the back door that was only slightly open. After that, he proceeded to move forward without uttering a single word and made a turn onto the road that is directly adjacent to the door that was open. In the moment that I was no longer in his line of sight, I dashed to the back of the house, slammed the door shut, and locked the doorknob as well as the deadbolt. That evening, I was dreading the thought of leaving. My automobile was located across the parking lot, and I did not want to walk there. I was certain that he was hovering around, observing, and waiting for something to happen. It is a great relief that I did not reveal the truth to him. That I was, in fact, by myself. I still get shivers whenever I think of the numerous ways in which that night could have taken a different turn. During my time at work, I had the most unsettling experience I've ever had. Late at night, I have lately heard a voice outside my window. That is obviously a female voice. She mutters, "Give it back," then calls out a name, and once more demands, "Give it back." I can just get a few phrases. If my window is open, it's loud enough to wake me. Usually, I hear it 4 times a week between 1 and 3 a.m. On some evenings, it is loud. Other times, it fits the typical city sounds, but I wake up when she talks unless I'm in deep slumber. 2 weeks of this made me sleep deprived and off target. I began to question my own ability. Every time I heard it, I would look out since the window is close to my bed. I never saw anybody. I started to suppose I was dreaming. Alternatively dreaming. I heard something else answer her till one evening. One man I know from my area seems to be really crazy. He lives diagonally opposite from me. I heard him yell out for whoever it was to turn off one evening. That was the realization I was not seeing. A few evenings later, I was out drinking with a friend. I was fairly inebriated when I came home. My location is off the main road. You have to follow an alleyway that winds into a little neighborhood to get there. Out of the alley, I came upon a woman lingering by my house. Holding a box the size of a sheet of A4 paper, she had wrapped papers inside. She was mumbling the same thing I had been hearing outside my window, demanding something be returned to her. She was facing my bedroom window exactly. I cried out in panic. Between the drink and the sleep deprivation, I was spiraling. Not yet had she seen me. I called the cops silently using that moment. The police arrived promptly. They hauled her away. She possessed, went kicking and screaming. That is the only way I could explain it. I became afraid. Living alone and unattached, I didn't want her to know I was the one phoning. I begged the cops to keep my details confidential when they recorded my statement. Later that evening, about 2 in the morning, I received a call from the officer who had taken my report. I heard it once more 5 minutes after the call ended. The voice hushed and said, "Give it back." She then issued a name call. I originally believed that everything was in my head, an illusion brought on by tension, until I heard it once more, but this time it emanated from the other side of my front door. It was at this point the pounding began. Froze. I turned away from the door and reached for my phone then. Calling the constable, I hurriedly told him someone was trying to enter at my door. He returned fast and looked about but found nothing. He urged me to try to cool off and keep my doors locked. At this moment I was hysterical. He added he will later once more patrol the area. I heard it once more 5 minutes after he left. Send it back. Now she was more loud. I wanted no more police calls. I didn't want to come seen as insane since I thought it was all in my imagination. I reasoned I was safe as long as my doors were locked. Trying to ignore the voice, I crawled into bed. I phoned the police the following morning to find out how long the woman they detained would remain under jail. She didn't quiet down until 5 in the morning, hence they stayed with her overnight. That day, though, they would be reviewing her condition. It dawned on me at that the person at my door couldn't have been her. Though not quite alike, their voices were rather similar. The same harsh, stale character, but something felt different. That made me even more afraid. Later on the morning, I had to head to work. I discovered filthy tracks all over the entrance door when I opened it. Trying to get in, someone has been hammering on or kicking it. Shaken, I grabbed pictures and headed for work. That evening, I showed the cops the pictures. They claimed there might be a group of persons engaged, maybe a cult or mentally ill people aiming at specific residences. For me, though, they lacked responses. The next night, I slept at the residence of a friend. The cops agreed to walk both my house and hers. That evening, nothing happened. Patrols kept on after that for a few days, but I never heard the voice once more. 3 days later, then, I got a call on my house phone. I picked up and heard a voice mumbling something angrily, but I couldn't hear the words. It couldn't be understood. The alarming thing is that no directory shows my phone number. Usually I never answer blocked or unknown numbers, but my niece was visiting and took it up. She claimed quiet was all that was there. She handed it to me then. I heard it at that moment. A low, furious muttering. I honestly feel relieved I couldn't grasp what they said. I have no concept what they meant. What kind of curse or menace they were aiming at me is not important to me. It terrors me when I consider the voice outside my window, the pounding at my door, the footsteps, and the possibility that more of them could be out there. I have been trying to find someone it could be, racking my brain. Nobody has fallen out with me. Not dated someone that would go to this level. To the best of knowledge, I have not created any enemies. Since then, everything has remained quiet. Should something else transpire, though, I will let you know. Early in the 2000s, this took place. I most certainly belonged in first grade. The narrative unfolds in Bulgaria, in a mid-sized town, not too big, nor too small. People believed this kind of place was ideal for raising children. Generally speaking, crime was little known. Should you sleep outside on a bench, nothing would happen to you. When some family friends from a nearby town paid us a visit one weekend, my parents thought we ought to all attend the park. Now, since all of the parks in my town are exactly on the outside of the town, they more resemble real forests than parks. The park walkways finally become forest paths. There isn't a central park in this quite small town. Instead, we have only long, skinny parks running alongside the river. One of such was the park we visited. On one side of the road was the river, on the other, cliffs and a deep forest. In childhood, I didn't enjoy that park very much. The trip to the end of it was long, and I became bored quickly. So, as young people do, I ran ahead, way ahead. My parents and the visiting relatives were invisible from far enough ahead. Normally on weekends, the path was crowded and straight with a few minor bends. Still, that day being summer, and most people were on vacation, it turned out to be shockingly empty. Nobody in either direction caught my eye. I started hearing things in the trees at that point. It was first faint, just shrubs whispering. Still, it was loud enough to hear even above the river's sound level. I halted and fixed my gaze on the forest. I then spotted him. From the forest, a figure sprang out running straight for me. He was dressed like a hunter, with long hair and a band across his forehead. Slung across his back was an air rifle. I had no frozen in fear moment, no doubt about anything. I turned and bolted. Screaming my lungs for my parents, I rushed as fast as I could. But I questioned anyone could hear me with the river raging next by side. Looking back, I can still see him hunting me. That's the flash of insight I had. This is it. This marks the last. I pictured him capturing me, pulling me into the forest, and me never seeing my family once more. Though first it felt like eternity, at last I saw my parents and the others. I came upon them scarcely breathing, red-faced, and in tears. I was sobbing, snot flowing down my face, totally overwhelmed. The man halted as soon as he came upon the grown-ups. "Start screaming at him," my parents asked what the devil he thought he was doing. He say nothing, just shook his head, as he would have been attempting to convey, I did nothing illegal. I was just trying to assist. The fact is, though, that park lacks any games. This is a public space. Even the part dedicated to the forest may only be half a mile wide before the cliffs start. People are always walking across it. At most you might find a wild fox. You have to travel far outside of town into a designated hunting area if you wish to hunt game. Moreover, openly carrying a gun in public is unlawful even now. Police and military personnel only are qualified to do it. Civilians can register air guns, sure, but you are not authorized to carry them about, particularly in crowded parks. Unless you were far in the countryside, you would never see hunters dressed like that anywhere close to a town. And even now, it is rare. We did not call him in. It would have been overly complicated. But that was the first and final instance I had of something like that. The area did not traumatize me in the end. Actually, I'm absolutely okay even now when I return to my hometown and run in that park after midnight. I will never forget, nevertheless, the manner man emerged from the forest. The way he sprinted directly toward me. And the way I really felt I would vanish that day. This started when I was 11. 2 younger brothers and an elder brother who was 16 at the time. Friday evenings would usually see my parents leaving us alone with pizza, some rented DVDs, and my older brother in charge after dinner. Generally though, my brother would go. He would leave me in charge and visit his friend's house just down the road on the same street. I had no trouble at all. Being the one in charge appealed to me. I could choose the movies. Friday night this particular was stormy. The rain came and went, thunder and lightning flashing every so often. While I was inside seeing a movie, my 2 younger brothers were playing on the carport. This large open area would have allowed you to fit 4 cars rather readily. We were let ride bikes or skateboards out there since our parents were not home. On the left side of the carport was a park. On that side, there were no neighbors, hence you would regularly find people jogging or strolling their dogs along the walk-through. You could stroll straight from our driveway into the park under streetlights lighting the path. It was a wonderful place for growing up. That evening, my brother was visiting a buddy as usual. He had left a note with the phone number, and my younger brothers hurried in, faces pallid, halfway through my second movie. A man is observing us from the park, they claimed. I would generally presume they were kidding, but their demeanor revealed something about not being. I followed them to check then. Looking out into the park, we stood in the carport doorway. Not anything. Then we noticed him when a bolt of lightning illuminated the area. A man standing in our yard observing us. We yelled, slammed the door, then hurried to my parents' bedroom. We locked the door behind us, reached for the phone, ran the cable into the bathroom where we locked ourselves in. We phoned the house of my brother's friend. When his friend responded, I mentioned to him someone was in our yard. He called for my brother loudly. 1 minute later, they both claimed to be riding right away. Though it was only about 5 minutes, the waiting felt like hours. My brother had already alerted the parents of a friend who contacted the police when they arrived. We gingerly left the bathroom as my brother and his friend yelled out for us. They reported the man was gone when we left the house. 2 police cars soon followed, and another automobile passed the park in search. The cops told us all was fine after looking over the yard, the house, the streets. Having them there seemed so consoling, as I recall. Also to having my brother back. I can only image what our parents must have thought when they got home and found neighbors gathering together along with police vehicles. Back then, they lacked cell phones, thus they knew nothing about anything until they arrived at the driveway. the man disappeared from our knowledge once more. From what I know, he vanished never to be seen. Years later, following my move out, my dad told me something horrifying. My younger brother, who had taken over my former room, woke my parents in a panic one evening. One individual was standing outside his window, he claimed. "Hey, buddy," the man had murmured. "Are your parents at home?" In those days, my parents never told us. Not long afterward, though, they replaced the big fly screen on the window with metal bars. The chronology lines up. Though I believe they dreaded the same individual, they never stated so. About 8 years ago, something occurred. It still bothers me still. Living in a reasonably big Midwest city, I am a single mother. Just myself and my child here. Generally speaking, my neighborhood is quiet, especially at night. Our street dead ends in a park, hence traffic is rather low. Winter was the season this occurred under. Outside, a snowstorm was roaringly strong. I smoke, hence even with the weather, I walked outside for one more cigarette before bed. Late, probably around 11 or 12 at night. It's difficult to look out from the covered porch with trees in front of it. I never turn the porch light on when I leave. I heard something distant as soon as I set foot outdoors. It sounded oddly like an animal growling. I lighted my cigarette nonetheless and turned to face the sound down the street. I came upon a man strolling. He was all black in attire. At first I couldn't figure out any specifics. Still I could hear him, speaking in a loud, guttural growl, the most diabolical voice I had ever heard. He was not even human in sound terms. Crazy individuals can sound unnatural, though, and I know that. It is difficult to articulate the terror speech brings about. Still, I froze and stood there, viewing, listening. He continued to talk, furiously incoherently about something. One word comes very vividly: this is the Book of the Dead. About half a block away, on the other side of the street, he was strolling. I hadn't shifted. With my phone in one hand and my cigarette in the other, I was standing just in front of my door attempting to quickly smoke it down so I could return inside. Before my street, I thought he would change at the junction. But he did not. He continued to go. He turned and started toward the dead end, toward me. Still mowing in that terrible, raspy growl. 1,000 ideas shot over my brain. I prayed he would not find me. Perhaps he was simply some insane man going by. I still couldn't see his face. He drew down his hood low. He came to cease walking then. He gave up speaking. He turned his hooded head in my direction gently. I dropped my cigarette, hurried inside, slammed and locked the door. To watch what he would do, I peeped out the window. He stood in front of us. Just stayed there, absolutely still, for what seemed like an eternity, but most likely only lasted 30 seconds. He then began once more walking. He crossed the street and came right before the pathway connecting my front door to the road. He stood facing my house 3 to 4 minutes. Watching through the slats, I was just 20 feet away from him, but I still couldn't see his face. I argued about phoning the police. Technically, nevertheless, he was not breaching any laws. He was on the sidewalk standing. He was just staring straight at my house. Nothing else. My heart started to hammer in my chest. Time crawled slowly. He turned at last and started walking once again, still speaking in that deep, demonic tone. At the end of the street, he strolled toward the park. Then he disappeared. I went to see my son. He was sleeping peacefully. For myself, I cannot say the same. That evening I slept little at all. About 10 years ago, when we were still living at our house with our parents, something occurred to my younger sister and myself. Though somewhat old, the 2-story house was comfortable. On the second story, our rooms faced one another across the hall. The bathroom lay at the end of that passageway. Not unique about it till tonight. About 1 in the morning, I stayed late on my laptop viewing YouTube videos while keeping my door open. Everyone else living in the house was fast sleeping. I listened for the creaking floorboards. Originally, I gave it little thought, old house, right? I next heard the light switch clicking on and the bathroom door opening. Still, I thought nothing was unusual. I assumed my sister would be heading to the toilet. Then I overheard something else, though. It seemed like whispering. I stopped the film and listened. The whisper came to an end. Rising, I looked down the corridor. The bathroom door was open rather widely. The brightness was on, but nobody was present in there. For a few perplexed seconds, I stood there. I then observed something odd. Mirrors. It became foggy, like someone recently had a hot shower. None had, though. And then, I promise you, I noticed something move in the mirror. Merely a flutter. One shadows. It zipped from one side of the mirror to the other and disappeared. Heart pounding, I backed off. My sister opened her door at that precisely. She cast pale eyes on me. "Did you notice that?" she murmured. I gestured. The whispering asked. She nodded in the other direction. It was emanating from the bathroom. Both of us stood there frozen. The toilet light then went off. Neither of us had gone anywhere. We headed into my room, locked the door, and stayed up for hours. We did not go asleep. We did not speak. We silently, wide-eyed, sat there waiting for the sun to rise. We asked our parents the next morning whether either of them had awakened in the middle of night. Both of them turned away. It never occurred once more. Still today, though, none of us know how to explain it. The mirror that is fogged up. The whispering. Shadow. Sometimes late at night, while we're remembering, we still discuss it. One thing we both agree on is also, whatever that was, it was not human. In 2017, this occurred. Not far from our hometown, I was camping with a relative in a state park. We have gone there several times previously, always had a great time. Still, this was an unusual journey. It began regular. About 20 minutes off the main trail, we put up our tent in a clearing, made some dinner, broke open some beers, and simply hung about the fire. It was quiet by the time we turned in for the evening, just the typical chirps and rustles one would find in the woods. But I woke up to something else about 2 in the morning. It lacked volume. Simply wrong. Like someone, or something, walking in slow, purposeful steps over the woodland. It was this consistent, crunching noise. I stayed motionless and listened while my cousin, still asleep, softly snogged next to me. It was close, whatever it was. Too close. I unzipped the tent flap gradually, just enough to see. It was dark, the fire had turned to coals, but the moonlight illuminated some of the clearing. I noticed it at that point. A figure. Tall, more than 6 feet, simple. Thin. Almost too thin. It flowed like it lacked bones. Its walk was erratic, as though separate strings controlled every limb. It arrived in the clearing and just stood confronting our tent. I missed a breath. I did not blink. It stagnated. Heart thumping in my chest, I stayed like that for what seemed like eternity, praying it would go away. It then slanted its head slowly and resumed walking mechanically. Not looking at us. Surrounded by us. It made a round of the clearing. Closing the tent flap, I turned aside. I shook my cousin back to life. First annoyed, he mumbled until he saw my face. "Something out there," I said softly. We listened silently as we sat. The footsteps came and went, receding and then returning as though whatever it was pacing. It then stopped. We listened to the slow, guttural sounds. Not rather a growl. More like a hum, deep and pulsating, like it emanated from inside the ground. Then quiet. That night we didn't sleep once more. We left carefully as the sun rose. The clearing appeared normal. But all around the location, precisely where the tree line started, there were these long, deep gouges in the ground. Like someone had circled the camp dragging a rake over the ground. None of any animal did that. We assembled and headed off without even having breakfast. Since then I have gone camping. None in the park, though. Whatever was out there was not something I would want to run across again. This occurred roughly 14 years ago. My family had recently moved into a new house, a large old one with squeaky flooring and a damp basement smelling of mildew. Even in the summer, this place felt consistently just a bit too chilly. The basement was accessible from a door in the kitchen. Usually it was locked. According to my parents, it was only for safety concerns. None of us youngsters wanted any of us falling down the stairs. Still, there seemed something strange about it. Unlike a cellar used for storage, the lock was outside of the entrance rather than inside as you would find. They never made use of it either. Not one time. Not even when the washing machine failed and they had to haul clothes to the laundromat for many weeks. They turned me off every time I asked about it. Just a weird old basement, my dad would have said. Most likely completely full with spiders. One evening my folks were out. I heard a tremendous thud, like something heavy had dropped right under me, home alone, working on homework in the kitchen. It came from the downstairs cellar. Froze. The door remained still. The lock continued to be fastened. I vowed, though, that I heard something down there. Anything dragging on the floor. Then came a knock. From the other side of the cellar door, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I did not move. I merely fixed my eyes on it. Yet another thump. Then quiet. I waited what seemed to be eternity. I persuaded myself finally it was the pipes, or perhaps something dropped from a shelf down there. I returned to my room aimed at forgetting about it. But after that evening, events got underway. Footsteps beneath the kitchen, when nobody else was home, would be heard. Whispers coming from the vents. Sitting near the basement door, my dog would whine and paw at it as though he were afraid or trying to warn us of something. I told her parents. They only advised me to give up seeing terrifying films. One night, then, I woke up to a great bang. Running to the kitchen, the basement door was wide open. The lock snapped clean off, as though someone had broken it from the inside. "Turn on the lights," I said. A few seconds later, my dad arrived frantically rushing. Direct behind him is my mother. They turned to each other after first staring at the open door. I inquired, "What's down there?" They gave no response. Grabbing a torch, my dad descended. My mother instructed me to shut the door and head to my room. That evening I slept little at all. The door was locked closed with strong screws and a chain early the following morning. Never again did my parents discuss it. I am a grown-up right now. Years gone by, they sold that house. Still today, though, every time I question my dad about that evening, he just says, "Better still if you don't know." This occurred back in college, during my sophomore year. I used to live off campus, 20-minute walk from my apartment to the university. Walking was great. It allowed me time to relax, clear my brain, listen to music. One evening I spent late at the library finishing a paper. Until I checked my phone, 1:23 a.m., I had no idea how late it had been. Usually the walk home at night didn't trouble me, but that night the streets were especially empty and the temperature was cooler than normal. About 5 minutes from my house, I saw a van moving gently down the other side of the roadway. White. Undetermined. Delivery vans were not unusual, but this one sent me a strange feeling. I kept strolling. I looked at it once more, but I could sense it matched my speed. I turned away a more sedate residential street, and a few seconds later I heard the gentle hum of tires behind me. The van had turned as well. I began to walk more quickly. It accelerated, just enough to match me, about 20 feet behind. I stopped abruptly and feigned checking my phone. The van also came to stop. Right now my heart was thumping. Hurrying across the street, I turned at the next block, far from my regular path. I reasoned that if it were coincidence, it would not follow. That did, though. I carried nothing of a weapon. I was terrified that running would set off whatever was inside, so I refrained. I thus took out my phone and gave my roommate a call. Strongly. "Hello, Guy. Could you come outside in 2 minutes?" Still behind me is the van. The van accelerated right away and took a corner, vanishing down a side street. I was shivering by the time my roommate arrived outdoors. I never sight the van once more. But for weeks I couldn't get rid of the sensation that someone had watched me, followed me, planned something. After that I started riding the bus. Even right now. And I never again walked home alone late at night. This occurred when I was young, perhaps at the age of 9 or 10 years old. My family had recently moved into a brand new house, that is, fresh to us. One of those classic split-level houses with shag carpet, small corridors, floor instead of ceiling vents. Little yet comfortable, my bedroom at the end of the hall was that I adored that room at first. One evening I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep. Summertime, and the air conditioning was running, so there was a mild, continuous whooshing sound coming from the floor vent close to my bed. Finally, I heard something more as well. Whisper. First, I assumed it was the air conditioner producing some sort of unusual sound. But the more I listened, the more I came to see it was hardly the system at all. This was a voice. Leaning over the side of the bed, I fixed my eye on the vent. 0. Rising from bed, I turned on the light and bent down next to it. The whisper came to an end. Only the frigid air caressing my fingers. I told my folks the next morning. They claimed it was most likely either the ducks settling or perhaps even mice. I wanted to trust them. But the following evening it happened once more. I listened really attentively this time. It was a voice, low and raspy, repetitious again and over, not only whispering. Originally I couldn't figure it out. More precisely, then. "Is it possible to hear me?" I turned still. Finally it said, "I can see you." Screaming, I burst from the room. My dad looked at the crawl area, the vent, everything, but he came back empty. For weeks, I stayed out of that room refusing to sleep. I returned finally, but I covered the vent with a big blanket. When we moved out years later, my dad at last admitted something. He discovered a small area under the house one time when replacing some old ductwork. A crawl space not included in the original plans. Within it, a covering, several empty food cans, and a stack of young readers' novels. Under the home someone had been residing. We shall never know just how long. Still, every now and then I wake up from dreams in which I hear that voice, faint and scratchy, asking me, "Are you able to hear me?"